You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 26. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Katie Wardrobe from midnightmusic.com.au, where you can find music tech online courses, lesson plans, tips and support. Today I talked to Karla McClain, who is a choir and general music teacher who's using iPads and Chromebooks to incorporate creativity and to encourage student-centred learning in her classes. You can find a list of the links mentioned in today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/26. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Today's guest is Karla McClain, a Portuguese-born music teacher from Farmington, Connecticut. Karla is an experienced middle school teacher who has taught choir and general music classes for more than 18 years. She currently teaches grades 7 and 8 choir and grade 3 general music at Irving O. Robbins Middle School, where she's been working for the past year. Karla's been using technology, in particular iPads and Chromebooks, with her students to encourage creativity and to improve music literacy skills. And when she's not teaching, you might find her stand-up paddleboarding, a hobby that she took up recently. So welcome, Karla.
Thanks, Katie.
Lovely to have you and to chat to you today. So stand-up paddleboarding, where do you do that? Is it somewhere locally?
Yeah, we have some lakes locally that we can go to. I just started doing it last year and just got my own paddleboard for my birthday. And so we've been out a couple times.
Oh, that must mean you're getting seriously into it then, if you've got your own board.
Yeah.
That's a great thing.
Yeah, I really like it. It's been fun and we can put the kids on the back of them and it's been great.
Yes, I love it too because I've been a couple of times. I have a friend here in Australia who runs classes and stuff, and he does competitive stand-up paddleboarding in far north Queensland, and yeah, I really loved it. He took me out sort of as an introductory lesson and we did like 1 kilometre or something like that and on a river, and he said, just look out for the crocodiles because there's a lot of crocodiles
we don't
out
have
there.
that problem here.
Yeah. I thought it was good, sort of motivation to be very on guard, and very alert while you're doing it. I don't know if he was joking or not, but it's very good for your core. It's an excellent workout, so it's really lovely. And I find it really peaceful. I think it's funny because with technology stuff, I find that I really need to make sure that I do non-technology related things in my week and to take the time out from the technology just to sort of reset everything, I think. And that's
definitely
one of those activities. So do you find that too? Yeah.
Yes, I definitely need time. I just actually spent a week in the woods at a music camp, and it's just nice to be away from everything and in the woods and away from all of that for a week and get back to basics every once in a while.
And that's my thing. I find getting back to nature is the thing that really resets me, sort of straight away, either near the beach or, like you said, sort of amongst trees and the forest and stuff. And my friends laugh at me because I'm always saying I need some nature, and then I'll go out somewhere and go for a run or something. It's so much more nice. Excellent. So middle school, has that always been your focus for teaching? It looks like it has from what I read on a couple of websites about you.
Yes. My first teaching job was halftime middle school, halftime high school. And then ever since that job, I've always been primarily middle school, which is, it's really my favorite. It's my home. It's where I belong.
I'm not in a teaching job at all, but that's always been my favorite sort of year level. I think some people are kind of a little bit worried about teaching that age group, but I think there's a lot of enthusiasm there, and they're a very engaging group of kids, and I really love it too. I think it's probably my favourite area as well. So if I was going to go into a school and do some teaching, I think I'd choose to do that too. And when did you start incorporating technology? Did you find that it was early on in your teaching career, or did you not have access to much early on?
My first job, things like making PowerPoints and presentations, and not really the kids really using technology for music's sake. And then in my third position at Bristow Middle School, we had access to, I did some things with Computer Lab, and then I was able to get some iPads. I had seen some iPads being used in the classroom, and I wrote a grant. And so then I started using iPads and having kids use them for lots of different things, GarageBand primarily, and then finding different apps to have the kids be able to work independently. The thing that I found that was nice was that I could have the kids work in small groups and collaborative groups, and also to be able to do like some individualized things that they maybe wouldn't typically do in a general music classroom. I think the focus of general music ends up, there's so much group music making and group activity. So it was nice to be able to have them do like whole group. It was nice to have them do like some small, more collaborative things.
Yeah, and I think the portability of the iPads lends itself better to that. Like a computer lab, you can kind of do the creative and collaborative things with small groups, but it's kind of harder to crowd around one computer at a desk, with chairs than it is with an iPad. You can go and sit on the carpet and, have a circle of kids working in the one screen and that sort of thing. Oh, that's really good. Go on.
I also had a very, very small classroom, so it was nice to be able to send them out in the hall to different groups and different areas of the building where they could work, and we weren't just confined to my tiny, tiny classroom.
Yes, and do you get other teachers complaining about that, or are they okay with it?
Not really, because the classroom where I was at the time, the hallway was my room was close to the cafeteria, and there weren't a ton of classrooms, like the gym was close by. So it was kind of a noisy area anyway, so it didn't really impact other classrooms that much. Yeah,
that's really good. It's funny, I've had the experience where I've run a workshop with teachers actually, and we were working in a building where there was, different groups working in that building. And so we were using one specific room for this professional development workshop today. And we were doing I think we were doing sort of storytelling and sound effects and creating spooky music. And I sent groups off with iPads, basically like you were saying with, for your students, sent them off to do something. And I had one group recording screams and door slamming and things like that down the corridor. And someone came out very angrily from one of the offices and just said, what on earth is going on? And can you keep it down? So the teachers were all coming back, sort of tiptoeing back down the corridor to my room, and they all looked really sheepish, and I'm like, what happened? You're looking really guilty. They said we got in trouble. So yes, it happens to adults as well.
Yes, it was actually a really good way to promote what I was doing, because we were in the hallway, so as people walk through and kind of see what the kids were doing. So it actually ended up working out as like some nice PR at the time, which was kind of funny. That's
a great idea, actually. Yes, that's a really good way of of framing it, I think. And maybe that's the argument. If other teachers are trying this and getting into trouble, you can sort of say, look, we're promoting our program. It's fantastic. Yes. And at your current school, do you have enough devices for, each student to have on their own, or are they working in groups with the devices?
So my current school, I just actually wrote a grant, and I will have iPads next year. We were primarily working on Chromebooks because I didn't have access. I had 2 iPads that I could use here and there for things, and a couple other iPads I could check out from the library, but I didn't have my own set. So I will next year, and I'll be able to do some more things. But we really worked a lot on the Chromebooks, and I think what's been pleasant is that there are so many more options now than there used to be on Chromebooks for working. Yeah,
I totally agree. I found in the very early days it was such a struggle to do much at all. And I think because technology's changed itself and even internet speed has changed, it makes it easier to do the music and audio-based things, which were very difficult in the early days. But
yes.
Gosh, I really struggled, and I thought, this is not going to go well,
Right.
We still struggle here a bit with our internet speed and in Australia it's not fabulous, but it is getting a lot better than it used to be. That's excellent. And so are they student devices, or are they still a school-owned device, the Chromebooks?
They're school-owned, and what's nice is that we have basically Chromebook carts in most of the classrooms. I don't have my own cart, but there are a couple of health rooms that are right next door to me, and I can borrow carts pretty much whenever I need them. So that's been really nice this year to be able to pull them in, especially with my larger groups of choir students this year. It's been nice to be able to pull them in for the kids to work on them.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about the sorts of things, how you incorporate the technology into the choir classes. What sort of things do you do?
So as far as like music creation, I had basically had this really wonky schedule. In my previous job, I had kids basically like some kids the same group of kids like 2 days a week, and then another group that was split 2 days a week, and then I could combine them together one day a week. In this job, I have some kids that are there every day, some kids that are there 2 days a week, some kids that are there 3 days a week. So trying to find a way to engage the kids that I had every day on the day when no one else was there, because basically they were there every day, so they knew the music the best out of anybody. So it's a little bit, so trying to figure out something interesting, and I had no curriculum, so it was kind of like, try whatever you want. So I took some things that I did with my general music kids and brought them in. So with the Chromebooks, we really worked on, I discovered Soundtrap last summer. And so I just started experimenting with them, and I said, we're going to try some different things. One of the things that we started with was I was trying to get 8th graders who were brand new to me to be a little more comfortable with singing for me. So what I had them do was I said, you have to record part of one of our choir pieces and then create some kind of accompaniment with it. So it was just kind of like a way for me to hear them sing in a very comfortable way for them, but then also allow them to be a little bit creative. And then I told them they could do something collaboratively. And I said, find a pop song that you like and try to recreate it, which was really engaging for them. And again, got them singing. And then we sort of I just kind of, as things went on and I saw how things developed, we did some things with creating our own rubrics and creating our own criteria for projects. And then by the end of the year, we ended up I talked to the library media specialist, and we did a composer showcase where they picked the best works that they had created during the year. And then they invited other peers in to check out their work.
Oh, that's fabulous. So the students themselves had input into the rubric and what they were going to be assessed on. That's excellent. And how did they go with that? Is that an unusual thing at your school? I haven't heard many teachers doing that. I would think the students would find that really motivational, and it gives them more an vested interest in the whole thing.
It's not unusual in our district at all. We have been working as a district as a whole for the past couple of years. They've been working with Ron Berger, who wrote Leaders of Their Own Learning. And the whole premise of it is really trying to get students more empowered and engaged in their learning. So creating their own criteria and creating rubrics are things that the kids are used to doing. And it was really nice because we had just tried some other projects with either no rubrics or me creating the rubric first. The kids sort of had an idea. By the time that they got to create it, they had an idea about what made a good piece of music on Soundtrap, and so it was good for them to we tinkered a little bit, and then they really knew. And it was interesting because I had 2 different 8th grade classes, and both groups had very similar things, but some of the conversations to kind of come to those things were different. So it was interesting to hear, what's long enough, or, what makes a good piece, or, is it the instruments? Is it the form? So it was really cool to have those conversations with the kids.
Yeah, that's really good. And because it sort of makes them think a bit more about all the different parts of a song or a composition, rather than just sort of a blanket, it's good or it's not good or something like that. And what actually makes it really good. I find that really interesting. I think that's really fascinating. And I think it would be good giving them those examples early on, first of all, before they get launched into, okay, what do you want to do? I think that would be a harder place to start. So that's really interesting. And with Soundtrap and, them creating the pop song and their choir pieces, what sort of approach did you take with that? Did you sort of give them free rein on how to do that, or some guidance or examples, first of all, with, this is, how much you should choose of the song, and, how to go about recording that and creating the accompaniment and so on?
Because Soundtrap was new to me too, at the beginning, I gave them just some very, very small criteria, pick a verse of the song. I didn't want it to be super, super long. But as far as the accompaniments went, again, I was learning along with them. So I let them have free rein. I kind of like to let them have free rein at first while I'm learning it with them. And then we figure out the new software together, then I start to give them some more criteria, just let them play and tinker.
Yeah, I think that's a great way, and I think some teachers feel like they really need to know everything about a software program before launching into it with students.
No.
And I think I agree with you. I think it's better to do it the other way around. Well, not the other way around, but to do alongside them, and maybe have some idea of the capabilities. I think is a good place to start for the teacher. This is what I know we should be able to do, i.e., record a vocal line or create an accompaniment with a software instrument, but then to work out the actual how to do it, then that bit's great to do with the students.
And they're so attuned to that stuff, and a lot of them are used to using a lot of this technology where they find tricks and tips that I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's fun for me to get to learn, and then they get to teach each other, because then I can say, we were working on something where somebody wanted to import something, and we Googled it and figured it out. And then that student became the expert. If somebody needed that, I said, go check with go check with Abby, because she figured out how to do this. So it's nice, because then it gives them some leadership opportunity too.
Yeah, I've suggested that in some workshops I've run, that you assign, specific students to be the tech genius or the
Yes.
tech go-to person for certain things. And it might be, like you said, just for one tiny aspect or one particular app, and then another student completely might be the expert in another area. And I agree. Kids love being asked. I think I've mentioned on the show before, my eldest son loves it if I ask him, how to do something, how to access something through the PlayStation on the TV or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
And he's so good at troubleshooting and kind of working out, the pathway of connections to things. And that's the way I think a lot of us, should be thinking as teachers, rather than just okay, I don't know how to do it and ask someone else,
Yeah.
To work it out yourself is really great.
Little more student-centered, constructivist approach. And it's sometimes, some of the kids struggle, but then when they figure it out, they are definitely a lot more proud of it. And I feel like they learn a lot more. Once there are certain things that I will do step by step and give them a little visual guide. A lot of kids, when it comes to saving and sharing and things like that, sometimes they need a little more. It's always the
worst
miserable.
part.
So I always try to make a little picture guide for that. And some of the kids figured out real quickly, but for some of the kids who need that, then I do have that visual guide for them, because that's always the part. It's I need to see what you did. So
yeah, exactly.
It's more important to me that they have the steps for that than they have for the creation process.
Yeah. And because there's so many videos anyway, I mean, again, my own kids are just so used to and attuned to going to YouTube for searching for things, and they will just do that automatically and find the answers. Now, I'd love to talk more about that workflow thing. I actually had a note to ask you about workflow, because this is the thing that's, I don't know, when I, run workshops or do online courses, my favorite bit is all the creative stuff. But then the hardest part for everybody is the exporting, sharing, saving, sending student work from student to teacher, or sending, templates from teacher to student. All of those things are the most painful part for some reason of the process. And, and there's some really great things you can do as long as you have, I think, your workflow worked out, and it's a set process for whatever it is you're using. And it varies from app to app and from, device to device. Like iPads are, for some reason, that's the most difficult part of using iPads, I think, and it's a bit easier on laptops and Chromebooks and that sort of thing. Tell us about yours. So let's take that example of the Soundtrap, creations that the students have made. What happens at the end of that process? What do they do when they've created their piece?
So at the end, with the Chromebooks, I have them save it to their Chromebook. And then we are Google Apps for Education District, so they can just put it right into their Google Drive, and then they can share it with me. I am using Google Classroom, but I haven't really had them submit assignments that way. That'll probably be because Google Classroom was new for me this year. But I probably will have them do a little bit more of that. I do post a lot of the directions for things and processes of how we're going to do things on Google Classroom. So that's been very helpful. But for me, it's easier to just have them share it to me and have the email, because I know that I have it, versus trying to search in folders. Because of the way my classes are set up, I end up with a million different folders in Google Classroom. And it's just a pain to try to figure out who's in this folder. So it's just easier to share it, and then I put it all in in a folder. Then when I'm grading it, then I can just go through it that way.
And so are they emailing you a link to the document itself or the folder itself in Google Drive?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Yeah, that's really good, because that's available to anyone, even if you are not using the classroom, apps for education sort of setup and that sort of thing. That's what I do a lot with people I work with, and that works really well for us because you can link to any document in Google Drive anywhere, anyhow. It's fantastic, really, really useful. And Google Classroom, I need to look into that myself. It's just become open, actually, I think recently for non-educators, because that was my issue in the past. I'm not out of school, and so it was harder for me to get access to a Google Apps for Education account, but I believe they've opened that up for just anyone now. So I'm really keen to sort of get into that and look at how the workflow happens in the Google Classroom setup. Yeah, it'd be really good. And Soundtrap is kind of connected to Google Classroom too, isn't it? Have you used that connection at all, that sort of integration?
I haven't used that function yet. No. Again, that's like this year was like year one of trying things, and then hopefully we'll get to that next year.
And I think that's also another important thing for maybe other teachers who haven't done this sort of stuff with their own students yet, is that whatever you're doing now, basically it doesn't have to be the end result. The final version of how you do things doesn't have to happen straight away. You can do really simple version up front and then develop it over time and add things or change things. And and then sometimes I think other teachers might look at someone who's got it all happening really well and think, oh my gosh, how could I get to that point? But I always think, well, I know that they've probably done it for a number of years and they've gone through many different versions of how they do things.
Right. And have crashed and burned. Like, I don't mind having something crash and burn. Like, I like it because then I learn from it and the kids learn from it. And I tell the kids all the time, like, you're my guinea pigs, we're trying this together. We're going to figure out together. And I think when the kids know that, then they're willing to try because they realize that you're taking a risk. So then they're okay doing it. I think we just that sense of, hey, we're all going to try this together. And if it works, great. And if not, then we'll figure out how to fix it. And I think they see that it's fair. They know if something goes bad, that it's not going to ding their grade, that if something doesn't work, or if the technology's not working, I think they just feel it makes it a little more of a safer environment. And I don't mind things not working that way, because I think it's, again, I learn much more and the kids learn much more from that process.
Yeah, I agree. It's taken me a while to learn that. When I first, started doing music tech stuff in education, I felt like everything needed to be perfect before doing anything in front of a group of people. And, and things did go wrong and I would be quite worried about it and stressed. And then you think, oh my gosh, this should all be working. I should have all the answers. But over time, I've done the same thing. And I've actually announced in workshops when something's gone really wrong, like, for whatever reason, I'll announce, okay, teaching moment. And, we talk through it, and I actually tell everybody what I'm doing to try and find the source of the problem, or how I would go about troubleshooting the issue. And that's become a really good process, because then we all contribute to that, and I ask the group, okay, so what would you do next, or what should we look at first? And that then leads to them being able to do it independently, hopefully.
Yes.
This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music Community. The Midnight Music Community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information and a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast, visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. You mentioned that you do some GarageBand stuff on iPad. What sort of things have you done there?
I did give the kids, this year I gave the kids a project where they could choose. I gave them like a little like tic-tac-toe board, and they could pick, like there were 9 options. They could pick 2 or 3. And so some were Chromebook things. I did give them a GarageBand as far as creating pieces. In my previous job, I did a lot of working when we were working like with the 1 and 5 chord and with blues and 3 chord songs. I did a lot of things like that because it's with GarageBand on the iPad. It's so easy to be able to create those chordal accompaniments.
Yeah.
So I had the kids, the 6th graders, one of my favorite things that we did like at sort of as the end of the year culmination is 2 chord songs. Like I would just have a list of 2 chord songs and I made little lead sheets. And then they had to, I had them record the accompaniment first because that was easier while they were singing whatever the tune was. Then they had to record the vocal with it and then they could add other parts to it. And we did this similar thing like with when I taught 7th grade and we did blues, 12-bar blues, same kind of thing. It just works really well. And that because it's just chords. The other thing I love about GarageBand on the iPad is, and my supervisor said this to me once, is that, they can create really sophisticated things.
Yes.
Even if they don't have the technical skills yet.
Yes.
So in my previous job, like the 6th graders and 7th graders they were doing all the buildup was for learning about chords and finishing solfege and reading notes on the staff. And then in 8th grade, then they transfer that to keyboards. So, that my kids really, they didn't have the skill set to be able to play chords yet. So to be able to just do that on GarageBand, they could still understand the functionality and how it worked and how to read a lead sheet. And that helped prepare them in 8th grade when then they were actually figuring out how to use the keyboards in the classroom. So it was a nice way to build up to that.
Yeah, that's exactly how I've used it too, because it's, like you said, it's so easy. You can get kids that, and the other aspect for me has always been that I can make a fantastic sounding guitar accompaniment, even though I'm not a guitarist, and I can't necessarily, I may know 5 guitarists who could come and record a beautiful part for me, but, it's not that handy to ring up someone and say, come over and record a beautiful acoustic guitar part. Whereas, in GarageBand, you can just set it up, choose your sound, choose your playback pattern. And I love that because there's patterns in all different styles. Oh my gosh,
great.
So good. And then, you get this fantastic sounding accompaniment, even if you're not a guitarist. And then, like you said, you can add your own creative parts after that by singing or playing or composing over the top. And I think it opens it up. I really miss that functionality in other programs. I really wish it was in something else as well, things like Soundtrack.
Yeah, like Soundtrack.
Yeah, or GarageBand on the Mac, desktop. I'm hoping that maybe they'll get on there as well, but I just love it on the iPad. It's one of my go-to activities, so hopefully it'll appear some other places.
Another thing that I did with that too was, you can set up that keyboard so that it's like just at the pentatonic scale. So it's great for improvisation. It's like taking, if you don't have, or even if I don't have enough, if I was doing something with mallets, xylophones, I could actually, set up a little keyboard to the notes that we're working on. So that was a really, really nice function of GarageBand too. Yeah,
I like that too. And I use that sparingly. I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest, that like the Pentatonic Scale, when you turn that on in GarageBand, for those who may not have tried it yet, you can sort of open up a keyboard, you can go into the settings and choose for it to limit the notes on the screen to a specific scale, like the Pentatonic Scale. And the only thing I don't love about it is that there's no visual representation of the intervals which are larger than the other ones. So it looks like it's all by step, whereas there's a minor third in there somewhere, So I wish they sort of represented that a little bit, had a little gap there, like kind of like when you remove notes from the
notes from the xylophone.
Yeah, that would make me more happy. And same with the blues scale. There's that sort of there's the semitone in the blues scale is not represented at all visually. It just all looks the same. But maybe I'm being too fussy and should just let it go, really. I mean, the aim is eventually that you'll move to the, what I call the real keyboard and get the kids to pick out the notes of the pentatonic scale. So that's a better option. But I really like the idea. I think GarageBand works really well as a way to simplify things as an introductory option, and then you move on to the real version, So I often do drum parts, for instance, and you can create drum parts. Oh my gosh, GarageBand on the iPad gives you about, 5 versions of options for creating drum parts.
Yeah.
Maybe not 5.
Yes.
It's probably 3 or 4, but, you know, some of them are more automated than others, and you do have input into them somewhat. But, you know, the ultimate for me is that you start off with the easy ready-made sort of versions and then move on to them actually physically recording all of the parts of the kit from scratch. And that works really well as a progressive kind of approach to recording and learning how that all works. So yeah,
it's also a great tool for special needs students because so many, especially autistic students, I'm sure over there too, but a lot of our autistic students, they're so used to using iPads anyways for communication or for other things. It's really, really great. And it sort of levels the playing field where those kids can really create something that's on par with their peers, which a lot of times for some of those kids, you know, their regular music making or music reading skills are not going to be at the level of their peers. So it's really cool when they can create something that's just as complex as their peers because of that digital interface and because it's, you know, because of the way that GarageBand works in the iPad. So that's been really, really awesome to see too, and to see what those kids can make really is fantastic.
Yes, I think so too. It's that level of success, and you know, you want kids to achieve an awesome sounding thing, and I think that's very hard. You know, I came very much from a notation background, and it's a massive barrier to composing if you sort of need to know a certain amount of notation in order to compose in a notation format, you know, on sheet music or staff paper, or whether it's an app or something. But things like GarageBand allow you to just kind of just record, and it just opens it up a bit more, and you end up with this awesome sounding thing a little bit sooner perhaps than the notation approach. But I still love the notation side of things too, so it's hard to let that go.
And I mean, we Kodai, both districts that I am in are, you know, Kodai, and we totally start with notation. It's only in middle school that we start to sort of back away and then let the kids see this other side of it. So I'm all about notation and music literacy. Yeah. But I also think it's a great way for kids to be creative, because I think a lot of times I know I was as a young kid who is a musician, you know, I always felt very, very just, I need to be perfect because of the notation piece. And so it's been a way for kids to be able to be creative and not worry about that piece of it. Yeah. It's really, really nice for them to see sort of both ends of it. And really, in today's world, this is how people are creating music. Yeah. So the notation part is important, but this is really important too, because digital music, I mean, this is really what people are doing out there in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a growing area, you know, on YouTube. That's, you know, you see lots of covers being created. It's really funny. I created a series of tutorial videos for the MuseScore software program, you know, really early on in their existence. And I actually talked to the MuseScore people and got to know them, and ended up creating, you know, sort of 10 or 11 videos in an introductory sort of way. And that was really interesting because a lot of the MuseScore users are from the background of performing first and creating, you know, by playing guitar or playing chords on a keyboard and so on, and doing songwriting in that way. And then they get to the point where they need other people to play their music, and notation is the thing. And so a lot of the MuseScore users have come from that background, and it was so different from them. You know, it was very hard for me to understand at first that that's the approach they were taking, and they couldn't understand why. You know, when you're working in a bar of 4/4 in MuseScore, you know, if you put a note, a crotchet into the bar, it will, of course, make the rest of the bar still add up to 4 by making the rest of the bar a crotchet rest and a, you know, minim rest, and it still adds up to 4. But people were writing to me saying, I didn't want the rests in there. I didn't ask MuseScore to put the rests in there. And I thought,
my kids say that all the time on flat. I didn't want to put a rest there. I'm like, but it has to add up to 4. Same thing all the time.
And so I had to actually made a whole video about why does MuseScore put rests in my bar when I didn't ask it to, something like that. Oh. But it was to explain that approach, whereas people from a notation background, they're like, well, of course it does that, you know. Mm-hmm. It's just such a different way of thinking. So, yeah, so that's I think it's really great that it's opened up, and you can approach things from any direction now. So whether it's notation first or, you know, the other way around. And yeah, I think technology, it's one of the best things about technology is that it's opened up opportunities for so many more people, and made it a bit easier to come into composing and creation of music. I love that aspect of it. And so Tell me about you mentioned music literacy. Have you got other websites and apps that you like to use for that? Lots of people use drilling apps, that will drill notes of the staff and so on. Have you got favorites in that area?
Yeah. For the iPad, I've used Tenuto, and I love that you can kind of set up the exercises to be what you want. And their website, musictheory.net, it's the same company. And I love that you can customize the exercises. So if my third graders are working on, or fourth graders this year, they're working on recorders and just doing like BAG notes, I could set up and limit the notes that they were doing to BAG. Or if we're working on specific solfege, you can really customize it. I've been toying around a little bit with, on Google Classroom, you can actually differentiate your assignments. So I can set up an assignment for specific students. So if I have, 5 students who I know really struggle, I can give them an exercise that has helpers on it. And then the rest of the kids, I can give the regular assignment on that. Good. So you can, it's great because you can customize it in a million different ways.
So tell me about the helpers part of it. I'm not familiar with that. Is that a way of adding more instructions to it?
Yeah, so there's, you can put on there, like if we're doing like note identification, you can put either, I think some of them have like a hint, or it actually puts like just where do is on the staff, or it gives them the actual note names on the staff. So it's just different ways that they can, if you're identifying notes, for example, just for some extra help.
Yeah, right. And so is that in a worksheet type thing that you've created, or is that in some app that you're using within Google Classroom?
It's musictheory.net.
Oh, it's in there. Okay. Yep. Okay.
Yes, it's in there. Yeah, when you do the customizable exercises, you can customize it to have those there or not.
Yep, right. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then I can take that specific exercise and assign it to the kids that I know need that little help or that little guidance.
Yeah, that's really useful. That's great. And other apps, have you been using anything else at all? Other things on the iPad even?
I think those are the only things this year that I've been using. I'm trying to think of other stuff that I've used in the past. What else? I've used a couple different things. I mean, those are the things I think that have been the most useful. I know as far as websites, I use Music Tech Teacher a lot because there's a lot of little fun exercises, and that's like a great, like if I have a substitute coming and I can set up an assignment on Google Classroom and say, okay, work on these 3 exercises or do these games, or even like at the end of the class as a whole class. Sometimes we'll play those games together, which work really well too.
Yeah, there's a great collection of games there, and I'll link to all of these websites that we're mentioning in the show notes for people who want to look them up afterwards. But yeah, I know a lot of people use that one. It's funny because a lot of the games on there, some of them are a bit harder for us to use here because we use the crotchets and minims as opposed to quarter notes and half notes. So a lot of her games are set up with what we would say the American style of notation.
Yes.
Naming. But that's okay. There's still stuff in there, and it's not bad for kids to become bilingual in that area anyway, because, you'll always come across that terminology sometime in your music career, whether you're working with a conductor from a different place and so on. Yeah, so that's really great. That sounds like you've got everything going on. I love it. Do you do things which are, outside your teaching? Do you do things to inspire yourself at all? I know you mentioned, we were sort of, via email, you mentioned that you went to see Waitress on Broadway, which is the Sarah Bareilles show, and she's starring in it, I think, as well. And so I'm sure that was an inspiring experience.
Yes, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing to see the show and to see the show with her when she was in it was just phenomenal. That was really, really fun.
And has she's stopped doing that now? Is someone else taken on the role now?
Yeah, someone else has taken on the role.
That would be a hard act to follow.
Definitely. She was, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised because a lot of times, like a pop stars in these shows, and they're not necessarily like, their singing might be great, but the acting is, but I mean, she was just amazing. Everything about the show. I cried through about half the show.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I'm absolutely hopeless. I cry with the joy of it all, the happiness of it all, and the,
yes.
It's terrible.
And it's just, and the show, it's just so poignant, and it's like her sort of journey through her pregnancy too. And as a mom, there's a lot of things that are just very poignant about the story as well. So
I'd love
definitely
to see
some
it.
moments there.
Yeah, she's actually my favorite female singer, I think, in a sort of a popular style. Like, she's my absolute favorite singer. I just think her vocal technique's amazing, and she's got a fabulous voice, and she's a great songwriter too. So she's kind of got it all going on.
And I listened after, I think it was, I saw on the Tonys last year that I saw the performance, Jessie Mueller performing, and then I was listening to the soundtrack, and then recently I discovered, so she made an album of herself singing all the Waitress music.
Yes.
And Jason Mraz is on there too. So I've listened, and that's even better because that's just like seeing her in the show, because it's her singing all that music. So that's even better than the other soundtrack.
I stumbled across the soundtrack accidentally because I use Spotify, and I think one of her songs, maybe one of those ones, came up in, like, Spotify each week gives me my Discover Weekly list, which I love. I'm obsessed with my Discover Weekly list. It's hilarious. So, maybe if you haven't used Spotify before, for those listening, you basically have an account. And once you've listened to music quite a bit on Spotify, it kind of learns what you like and which artists you like. And then each week, Monday for me, it gives me a new playlist of, here's some things we think you like. And I have a feeling one of her songs was in that, From Waitress. And I was like, how did I not know there was this whole show? So I started listening to that and found that she had another whole album that I hadn't listened to as well. So I was very excited.
And it was just, I took my mom, and my mom is not, she's a supporter of music, but she is not a musician and not someone who's like goes to, is really into theater all the time. And she's like, I would go see this again because it was just funny. It was just like had the right combination of like funny and poignant and just very well done. And she was like, I would come see this again in a heartbeat. So.
Yeah. Well, I hope it comes here to Australia, because that's probably the only way I'm going to get to see it. A bit hard to travel over there at the moment, but I'd love to just see it. It's it's just great. And I can't listen to her Gravity song is so beautiful. It's one of my favorites ever, and I can't listen to anyone else doing covers of it because her version is so perfect. And I just like, no, I'm sorry, no one else can do.
No.
That's great. Fantastic talking to you today, Karla. I love hearing about what other people are doing, with their students and incorporating technology, and I think it's great. And we'll put all these links up on the show notes. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing what comes next for you.
Great. Thanks. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks, Karla. Bye-bye. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/26. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.